On day one, you feel excited. You open a video. You learn something new. Day two, you are tired. You tell yourself you will do it later. You don't. Day three, the guilt shows up. You avoid it. Day four, you say, next week. And just like that, you are back at zero. This is not random. This is a pattern. And no, you are not lazy. You are stuck in a loop that is designed to make you quit. Here's the truth most people never say. Motivation is unreliable. If you depend on it, you will restart forever. But there's a way out, a real one. Today, you are going to break this cycle. For good. You know this feeling. You open your phone to study English. Just 10 minutes. Nothing heavy. But before the video even loads, something pulls you away. A notification. A quick scroll. Just one short break. And suddenly it is gone. The time. The focus. The intention. Later that night, it comes back. That quiet voice. I should have done it. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just there. You are not failing in public. You are failing in private. And that is what makes it harder. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. You go to work. You handle your responsibilities. You function. But inside, there is this constant friction. You know you could be better. You know you should be consistent. You know this matters. And yet it keeps slipping. Not once. Not twice. But again and again. You start strong. Then life gets busy. Energy drops. Focus disappears. And the habit fades. Then comes the reset. Next week will be different. You believe it for a moment. It even feels real. Until the same pattern repeats. Think about that. How many times have you said, I'll start again on Monday? And be honest. How many of those Mondays actually changed anything? This is not about knowing what to do. You already know. Watch, listen, speak, repeat. Simple. But simple is not the same as easy. Because the real battle is not English. It is what happens in 5 seconds after resistance shows up. That moment when you feel tired. When your brain looks for an exit. When later feels more comfortable than now. That is where everything breaks. Not in the plan. Not in the goal. In that small, invisible moment. And most people never notice it. They think they lack discipline. They think they are inconsistent. They think something is wrong with them. But that is not the full picture. You are not confused. You are fragmented, pulled in different directions, trained to react instead of decide. You try to focus, but your attention is already tired. You sit down to learn, but your mind is still running from everything else. So even when you try, it feels heavy. And when something feels heavy, you avoid it, not because you are weak, because your brain is doing exactly what it was trained to do. Avoid discomfort. Seek relief. That is the pattern. And until you see it clearly, you will keep restarting. Again, and again, and again. So the real question is not, why can't I stay consistent? The real question is this. What is actually happening in those small moments when you choose to stop? Because that is where your progress lives. And that is also where it dies. But here is where most people get wrong. They think the problem is motivation. They say, I just need to feel more driven. I need to get inspired again. I need to want it more. That sounds right. It feels logical. But it is not true. Motivation is not your solution. It is your trap. Because motivation is unstable. It comes fast. And it disappears faster. You feel it on day one. You feel excited, focused, clear. You sit down and everything flows. But that state is temporary. It was never designed to last. And this is where things start to break. Because without realizing it, you make a silent decision. I will study when I feel like it. Think about that. If your progress depends on how you feel, what happens on the days you feel nothing, those are the days that define you, not the high-energy days, not the motivated days, the quiet ones, the heavy ones, the days when your brain says no. That is where consistency is either built or destroyed. And your brain is not neutral in this. It is biased. It is designed to protect energy, to avoid discomfort, to choose what feels easy right now. So when you sit down to study, your brain does a quick calculation. This is effort. This is slow. This is uncomfortable. Then it offers you an alternative. Something faster, easier, more rewarding. Your phone, social media, a quick video, instant relief. That is dopamine, not the complicated version, just the simple truth. Your brain rewards what feels good now, not what is good for you later. So every time you switch, every time you say, just 5 minutes, you are training your brain, you are teaching it. Discomfort means escape, and the more you repeat that, the stronger the pattern becomes. This is called conditioning, not in a textbook way. In a daily, invisible way, you feel resistance. You escape, you feel better. That relief locks the behavior in place. So next time your brain skips the thinking part, it goes straight to avoidance, faster, stronger, automatic. That is why it feels like you are not in control. Because in those moments you are not deciding. You are reacting. And there is another layer most people miss. Attention fragmentation. You are not just distracted. Your focus is broken into pieces. You check your phone, then your email, then a message, then a video, back and forth. All day. Your brain never fully settles. So when it is time to study, you expect deep focus from a mind that has been trained to switch every 10 seconds. That mismatch creates friction, and friction creates avoidance. So you sit there and it feels harder than it should, not because English is hard, but because your attention is exhausted. This is why you start and stop, again and again. Not because you don't care, but because your system is working against you. Let that sink in. You are not failing randomly. You are following a pattern, a predictable one. Motivation spike, short burst, resistance, escape, relief, repeat. That is the cycle. And most people stay inside it for years. They keep waiting to feel ready, to feel disciplined, to feel different. But feelings are not stable enough to build anything real. So here's the shift. You do not need more motivation. You need a system that works even when you don't feel like it. Because if your system only works on good days, you will never become consistent. And if you are never consistent, you will always stay where you are. That is the real problem. And now you can see it. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Not a genius, not someone with unlimited time, just a normal person. A guy named Daniel, mid-30s, full-time job, long commute, always tired in the evening. For years he said the same thing. I want to improve my English. And he meant it. He bought courses, downloaded apps, saved videos. His phone was full of good intentions, but his behavior told a different story. He would study hard for 3 days, sometimes 5, then disappear for 2 weeks, then come back with energy again, then disappear again. That cycle lasted for years, not because he was lazy, because he was waiting to feel ready, waiting for the right mood. One day, something shifted. Not dramatically, not emotionally. He just got tired of restarting. That quiet kind of tired. So he made a decision not to study more, not to try harder, to make it smaller. He set one rule, 10 minutes a day, no matter what. Not when he felt motivated, not when he had free time. Every day, even on bad days, especially on bad days. At first, it felt almost pointless. 10 minutes? That is nothing. His brain resisted. This won't make a difference. You need to do more. But he ignored that voice. Because for once, he was not chasing results. He was protecting consistency. That was a shift. First week, nothing changed. Second week, still slow. Third week, boring. Same videos, same sentences. No breakthrough. This is where he used to quit. This exact point. But this time he didn't. Not because he felt strong. Because the rule was simple. 10 minutes. No negotiation. So he showed up again and again and again. Something interesting started to happen. Not outside. Inside. The resistance got quieter. The start became easier. The friction dropped. By week 5, he no longer argued with himself. He just did it. Like brushing his teeth. Automatic. By week 8, something else changed. His listening improved. Slightly, but noticeably. He caught words he used to miss. By week 12, his speaking felt less heavy. Still not perfect. Still slow, but no longer stuck. Now compare that to his old pattern. 3 intense days. Then nothing. Restart. Repeat. That never gave his brain enough repetition to adapt. This did. Not because it was powerful. Because it was consistent. Let that land. A highly intelligent person who studies once a week will lose to an average person who shows up daily. Every time. Because the brain does not reward intensity. It rewards repetition. That is how skill is built. Quietly, slowly, under the surface. Daniel did not become fluent overnight. But something more important happened. He stopped quitting. And once that stopped, progress became inevitable. Think about that. What would change in your life if you simply removed quitting from the equation? Not perfection, not speed, just no more stopping. Because that is the real difference. Not talent, not intelligence. Consistency. That is what separates people who stay stuck from people who eventually break through. Now we need to look at something most people never see. Not the goal, not the plan, the pattern underneath everything. Because what you are dealing with is not random. It is a loop. And once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. It starts small, almost invisible. You sit down to study. Everything is fine for a moment. Then it hits. A slight resistance. Nothing dramatic. Just a feeling. A bit of pressure. A bit of discomfort. That is the trigger. This is where the loop begins. Right after that feeling comes the urge. Maybe I'll do this later. Let me check something first. I'm not in the right mood. It sounds reasonable. That is why it works. Now comes a decision. But it doesn't feel like a decision. You reach for your phone. You open another tab. You step away for a minute. That is the escape. And immediately you feel better. Relief. The pressure is gone. That relief is important because your brain notices it. It connects the dots. Ah, this works. Discomfort appears. You escape. You feel better. That is a reward. And rewards build habits. So the next time resistance shows up, you don't think. You react faster than before. That is reinforcement. And now the loop is complete. Trigger. Urge, escape, relief, repeat. That is the system running your behavior, not your goals, not your intentions. This loop, think about your last few days. Be honest. How many times did you say, I'll just take a short break and never come back? How many times did later turn into not today? That is not lack of discipline. That is a trained response, and it gets stronger every time you repeat it. Here is a scene you know well. You finish work. You feel drained. You tell yourself, I'll study after dinner. Dinner ends. You sit down. You open your phone. Just for a second. 30 minutes pass. Then an hour. Now it feels too late. So you say, I'll start tomorrow. And in that moment, the loop wins again. Not loudly, quietly. That is how it takes control. Not one big decision. 100 small ones. And here is the dangerous part. Each time you escape, you are not just avoiding the task. You are training your identity. You are becoming someone who quits when things feel uncomfortable. Not once, repeatedly. That is what drains you, not the effort of learning. The constant breaking of your own word. You say you will do something, then you don't. Again and again. Over time, you stop trusting yourself. That is the real cost, not slow progress. Loss of self-trust. And when that trust is weak, even small actions feel heavy, because part of you already expects failure. So you hesitate. You delay. You avoid starting at all. That is the deeper loop, not just behavior. Identity. Let that sink in. You are not just learning English. You are training how you respond to discomfort every single day. So the question is not, why do I keep quitting? The real question is this. What do you do in the 5 seconds after resistance appears? Do you stay or do you escape? Because that one moment repeated over time decides everything. That is the system. And until you change it, nothing else will stick. Pause for a second. Don't just listen. Look at yourself in this. Because right now you have 2 options. You can agree with everything you've heard so far. Nod your head, feel understood, and then do nothing. Or you can actually see the pattern in your own life, not in theory, in detail. Think about the last time you said, I'll start tomorrow. Did you mean it? Or was it just a way to escape the discomfort today? Be honest. How many times have you restarted with the same plan, the same intention, and the same outcome? At what point do you stop calling it bad luck and start calling it pattern? This is the moment most people avoid. They stay in agreement. Because agreement feels good. Change feels uncomfortable. But nothing changes in agreement. Everything changes when you decide, I'm done repeating this. So decide, right here, are you just listening, or are you actually ready to break the cycle? So now you see the pattern. Good. But seeing it is not enough, because awareness without action changes nothing. You don't need a better plan. You need a system that works even when you don't feel like it, not your best ones. Because your life is not built on perfect days. It is built on the messy ones. The tired ones, the distracted ones. That is where your real standard is set. So we make this simple, not impressive, effective. First, you need a minimum. A non negotiable baseline. Something so small you cannot justify skipping it. 10 minutes of listening. 5 minutes of speaking out loud. That's it. Not optional. Not flexible. Daily. Even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Because those are the days that matter. Now your brain will resist this. It will say, that's too small. That won't make a difference. Ignore that. Your brain is addicted to intensity. Big plans. Big effort. Big expectations. then burnout, then nothing. You've seen this before. This time, we're doing the opposite. Small, controlled, repeatable, because consistency beats intensity. Every time. Let me make this clear. 15 minutes every day will outperform 2 hours once a week. Not because it feels better, because it trains your brain to show up. That is the real skill. Showing up. Now here's the second piece. You need something visible, a simple tracker, a calendar. Every day you complete your minimum, you mark an X. That's it. No complicated system, just a visual chain, day after day. And your only job is not to break it. Think about that. You are no longer chasing fluency. You are protecting a streak. That changes everything. Because now, even on bad days, you will do something. Maybe just 1 minute. Maybe just one sentence out loud. But you will not break the chain. And that matters more than doing it perfectly. Because discipline is built in moments like that, not when it's easy, when it's inconvenient. Now here comes the part most people avoid. Boredom. There will be days when this feels repetitive, slow, pointless. You will watch the same type of content, say the same simple sentences, and your brain will say, "This is not working." That is a lie. That is exactly when it is working, because skill is not built in excitement. It is built in repetition, quiet repetition, the kind nobody sees, the kind that feels almost invisible. That is where your brain adapts. That is where fluency grows. So instead of chasing motivation, you train tolerance. Tolerance for repetition, tolerance for discomfort, tolerance for showing up without feeling ready. That is the shift. Let me give you something simple you can remember. Make it too small to fail. That is your rule. If you are tired, do 2 minutes. If you are busy, do 1 sentence. If you don't feel like it, do it anyway, but smaller. Never 0. 0 is the problem, not low effort. 0 resets the loop. 0 trains quitting. So you remove 0 from your life completely, and something changes, not overnight, but steadily. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop negotiating. You just act. Small, daily, consistent. That is how identity shifts, not through motivation, through repetition. And over time, what felt hard becomes normal. What felt forced becomes automatic. And one day you don't ask, "Should I study today?" You just do it. That is when you know the system is working. Now slow down for a moment. This is a part most people skip. Not because it is hard to understand, because it is uncomfortable to face. So don't rush this. Look at your own pattern, not in general, in detail. When you say you want to improve your English, what do you actually mean? Do you want the result, or do you want the process that creates the result? Because those are not the same thing. One feels exciting, the other feels repetitive. And your behavior already shows which one you've been choosing. Think about the last 7 days, not your intentions, your actions. How many times did you sit down and do the work even when you didn't feel like it? And how many times did you delay just long enough to avoid it completely? Be honest, because this is not about judgment. It is about clarity. Here is another question. When discomfort shows up, what do you usually do? Do you stay with it or do you escape it? Not once, repeatedly, because that pattern is shaping your future right now. Quietly. You don't notice it in a single day, but over weeks, over months, it becomes your identity. Someone who follows through, or someone who stops. And this is where it gets real. If nothing changes, if you continue exactly like this, where will you be 6 months from now? Same level? Same frustration? Still saying, I know what I should do, but not doing it? Think about that. And now flip it. What if you didn't improve fast, but you didn't quit either? What if you were just consistent? Small effort. Every day. No drama. No restart. Where would that take you? Because that path is available. Right now. But it requires something simple and uncomfortable. You have to stop negotiating with yourself. You say you will do something, and then you don't. That gap matters. More than your level, more than your talent. That gap is where trust breaks. And without trust, every goal feels heavier. So here is the real question. Do you trust yourself to do what you said you would do? Not on your best days, on your worst ones. Because that answer explains everything. And it also tells you what needs to change. Here is the part people don't like to hear. Nothing dramatic is going to happen if you keep quitting. There is no big failure, no silent collapse. That is what makes it dangerous. It happens quietly. You skip one day, then another. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. And you are right. One day doesn't matter, but the pattern does. Because every time you choose not to act, you make the next time easier to skip. Think about that. You are not just missing practice. You are lowering your standard. Slowly, repeatedly, and over time that becomes your normal. Not discipline, not consistency, but hesitation, delay, excuses that sound reasonable. I am tired. I'll do it tomorrow. I need more time. You've said these before. They feel harmless, but they are not, because they train you to walk away from your own commitments. And that cost adds up, not in one moment. In hundreds of small moments no one else sees. You start to expect less from yourself. You stop pushing when it gets uncomfortable. You stop even starting, because part of you already knows how it ends. That is the real loss. Not your English level, your self-trust. And once that weakens, everything becomes harder. Focus becomes harder. Discipline becomes harder. Even small actions feel heavy, because deep down you don't fully believe you will follow through. So you hesitate. You wait. You stay stuck. Not because you can't improve, because you keep stepping away at the exact moment growth begins. And that is the truth most people avoid. You are not far from progress. You are just consistently leaving right before it happens. Again, and again, and again. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. Same pattern, same results, just more time passing. Quietly. So now you are the choice, not a dramatic one, a quiet one. The kind nobody sees. You can go back to what you've been doing. Rely on motivation. Start when you feel ready. Stop when it gets uncomfortable. Repeat the cycle. Or you can change how you operate. Not your goal, not your ambition, your standard. Because fluency is not built on intensity. It is built on what you do when you don't feel like doing anything. That is the line. Most people never cross it. They stay dependent on mood, on energy, on the perfect moment. But the people who actually improve, they remove that dependency. They decide once, and then they follow through, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is boring, even when it feels like nothing is happening. That is discipline, not punishment. Order. It is the ability to act without negotiating with yourself. You say you will do something, and then you do it. No debate. That sounds simple, but it is rare, because most people break that agreement every single day, and over time they stop taking themselves seriously. You don't need more confidence. You need evidence. Evidence that you can rely on yourself. And that only comes from action. Small actions, repeated daily. That is how self-trust is rebuilt, not through thinking, not through planning, through doing, again and again and again. Let this be clear. You do not need to feel ready. You need to start anyway. You do not need to feel motivated. You need to follow the system. Because once you remove emotion from the decision, everything becomes simpler, not easier. Clearer. You don't ask, do I feel like studying today? You ask, did I meet my standard? That is a different life. A more stable one. A more honest one. And over time, a more powerful one. Because now, progress is no longer random. It becomes predictable. If you show up daily, you improve. It's not a question. It's a result. So this is a shift. You stop identifying as someone who tries, and you become someone who executes. Quietly, consistently, without needing to feel inspired. That is where fluency begins. Not in a burst of motivation, in a pattern of discipline that you refuse to break. Fluency does not belong to the most talented. It belongs to the person who refuses to quit. If that is the standard you choose, stay here. Subscribe. Type, "I will not quit" in the comments. And more importantly, take your first action today. Not tomorrow. Today.